wax a snowboard today for the Grove and for Rainier. Happy Friday. Alright, anyhow. So, first part with waxing a snowboard, take the bindings off. When you heat up the board with the iron and the bindings are in pulling on the base, it can fuck it up. So yeah, you want to take the bindings off. I like to put Scotch tape down and just mark where my bindings were at, because it just makes it a lot easier when you're putting them back on, and you can pencil in the angles that you had your bindings at as well. So yeah, we're gonna get this board all waxed up. First thing we want to do is check the edges, make sure there's no like bumps or anything going on after it's getting beat up on the mountain. So yeah, I just kind of run my hand down, figure out if there's anything shitty. So what I'm going to do first is actually just stick the board in here on this little ghetto rigged board mount thing that I built. And I'm going to take this guy, which is an edge sharpener, and I'm just going to run it down the edge from tip to tail and just clean out and sharpen and smoothen out the edges a little bit. And we're going to put it back on the bottom here. And next thing we're going to want to do is check the actual edges that are on the base side of the board. So to smooth any of that out, what we're going to want to do is use either this, which is called a diamond stone, or a gummy stone. And you basically just want to smoothly run it across the edge. So I'm going to start with this side actually, and you want to always pretty much go tip to tail. Anytime you're moving anything on the base of the board, always go tip to tail, because that's where you're riding. Alright. Next is going to be actually taking any excess wax and dirt and anything off the actual base of the board. Now, if the type of riding you do or where you live and the conditions you have, if you're riding on a lot of crap, a lot of dirty fake snow, you can use base cleaner, which will actually, it's kind of like a citrusy little oil type thing that actually will rip out and pull out any dirt and any grime. It'll just take everything out of the pores of the base. I don't really have to do that too often. I usually just use a brush to kind of scrape out any excess wax and stuff, because what we ride out here in Bend is pretty solid. So all you want to do is just go from tip to tail again and just kind of really dig in and brush out any excess wax. Ready to start waxing the board. Alright, now it is time to get down to the good stuff. Alright, so you want to put your iron on at a heat where it's going to melt the wax, but not actually cause it to like smoke or anything like that. And then make sure there's nothing hanging out below, because it can drip. And what you're going to do is actually just hold the iron like so, put the wax against it, and let it just drip on. You're going to start by going around one sidewall. Just take it down the rail. Just nice and slow. Might run out of wax here. What you're going to do is you're going to do a little figure 8 action all the way down the board. Bring it right back. And I go one more down the middle. A little faster this time though. Just kind of bring it back. And what I like to do is kind of get a little bit extra along the edges on the tip of the board, because you're going to be pushing the wax down from tip to tail, so it kind of helps when you're having some little extra wax just starting it up here. One thing with waxing too, the more you put on, the more you have to scrape off, so you want to use the right amount without overdoing it. So you want to be able to coat the board really nice without actually putting too much on it. You don't have to focus on the actual tip and the tail as much because they're not really pressing on the board. So it's much more important that you actually get the base of the board where it's actually going to be in contact with the snow, especially the edges. Most of the time when you're snowboarding, you're on one side or the other. So those are going to be the areas that dry out the fastest, that actually need the most wax. And so what I'm going to do to start here is I'm just going to kind of move it back and forth and actually let the wax melt. Alright, and then I'm just going to really slowly drag it across the entire board, tip to tail. I'm not really putting a lot of pressure into the board or the iron. I'm just letting it kind of melt the wax and glide on its own. And I keep it at like a little angle, like you can see, so it kind of pushes the wax to the edge of the board. Just make sure it gets a nice good coating. And if it ever feels kind of hung up like that, I just give it a little wiggle. One thing with waxing a snowboard with a hot iron, you do not ever want to let the iron just sit on the board. And you don't have to overthink it. Obviously, I'm moving it pretty slow right now, but just don't be an idiot. Don't just leave it on there and just go walk away or something, because it's a hot iron. It can melt the plastic in the board and fuck it up, and then it won't take wax anymore, and you might just fuck up the whole thing. So yeah, just don't be an idiot with that. Alright, so now we are going to scrape the wax off. Shittiest part of the whole thing. Alright, anyway, I'm going to flip the board around, so I'm going to wax it that way, and you want to go tip to tail. And one thing I do, so I grab my scraper. Another little thing that I like to do, kind of a pro tip or whatever, is I use the same paper towel that I used that had the base cleaner on it, and I actually put some on the scraper, because any wax from last time, it's going to pull off the scraper, so you got a nice good edge to pull the wax off this time around. Just helps clean it off. Makes it nice and smooth. Let's try it out the other side. Oh shit. Alright, so I'm going to start just by focusing really on the tip and tail. I didn't put a lot of wax on the tip and tail this time around. Sometimes, and usually I put a little bit more, but I'm going to start by just scraping a little bit off the tip and tail. And I'm not really focusing on direction this time. Just focus on getting the first layer off. Alright, and now that we've got a little bit cleared off, we are ready to start the real waxing. So again, just from tip to tail, I start with it angled this way, but I'm going to finish going that way. It's just how I prefer it. I think this is a better way to get more wax off. So in the beginning, that's how I like to do it. And then I finish it off going this way so that it smoothens out the remaining wax. Anything that gets left behind you can't scrape off. And then now what I'm going to do before I actually finish waxing off the base is I'm going to make sure that I clean the edges of all the wax. You're going to be digging your edges into the snow. Don't want any wax on them. So I'm going to start with actually just scraping along the sidewall. I think I might have dripped off to the side. And back to the normal waxing. Good. So once you give it a good scrape, you can kind of start brushing some wax off. And just take a look at it, especially under the light, and rub your hand over it. And you'll kind of find that you'll kind of feel maybe some stickier spots that have a little bit of thicker wax. They're not that smooth. And you can really get in there and scrape those off. And just smoothen it out even more. So you're not going to get all the wax off, but you obviously want to just get as much as possible and then make it as smooth as possible. So just get out any other little areas. Alright. So we are done with the scraping part. Now we just got one thing left to do, and that's basically what is called adding structure to the board. So what that means is we're going to take our nylon brush here, scrape off any wax or any crap that might be on it, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to run it down, tip the tail, and just basically put these really small grooves into the wax so that when you're gliding, it's actually going to make you go faster. It's going to give the little thin layer of water, which is what's between the board and the snow when you're riding, it's going to give it a channel from tip to tail. So I'm going to start actually by just rubbing out the nose, because the curve of the nose and the tail makes it a little bit harder to scrape it and get it smooth. So I'm just going to rub this out a little bit. I'm going to rub out the tail a little bit as well. And then I'm just going to go tip to tail, putting in a good amount of pressure and just near it up. And if you're ever running across with what I just did there, I was going and it was smooth and then I felt it slow down. Just get in there a little bit more, smooth it out. Alright, and then just last thing to do here, just dust off all the excess little powdery wax stuff that kind of builds up when you scrape like that. Or not scrape rather, but use the brush. Just knock all this crap off. Again, I kind of run tip to tail, as is the mantra. And then flip it upside down real quick too, because sometimes you get some wax on the nose and the tail. Scrape any of that off. And then, bam, you're good to go. Board is freshly waxed, ready to get out there and rip. Start praying for powder. Shout out LibTech. Shout out Rainier, wherever it went. All right.